Usually the banter goes away. I think I'm programmed.
And we should
Okay.
start the episode. Although you
All
should
right.
keep
All right. Here
this
we go.
as part of it.
I'll figure something out. Okay. Welcome to Castle of Horror, the show dedicated to horror movies and awesomeness. This week we continue our Stephen King miniseries with a look at the 2017 film It, or It, Chapter 1. We've also, by the way, reposted our discussion from a couple years ago of the TV miniseries It, if you'd like to revisit that as well. Bear in mind, if you haven't seen today's movie, we're talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have seen it. So warning, spoilers ahead. This movie is in the theaters right now. So this is one time when this warning is meaningful. We're going to talk about the whole film. From Denver, Colorado, I'm your host, Jason Henderson, author of the upcoming Young Captain Nemo series from Fievel and Friends, Macmillan Books. With me from Austin is Tony Salvaggio, tech director at Rooster Teeth Studios, lead singer and bassist of the band Deserts of Mars, and lead guitarist of the band Rise from Fire. Say hello, Tony.
Howdy.
Howdy. Also in Austin is Mr. Drew Edwards, editor-in-chief of HorrorMovies.net, writer for Rockabilly Online, and creator and writer of the long-running comic Halloween Man. Say hello, Drew.
Welcome to the Losers Club, assholes.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And finally, also in Denver, she's been wanting to discuss this movie all day. As always, color commentary, so-called, from attorney Julia Guzman of Guzman Immigration of Denver. Say hello.
You'll float too. You'll float too.
You really loved this. I think you've been more delighted by this movie than anything since, I don't know, Grease 2. I think this is the film. This is the film to capture you. This is your cool writer, Julia. This is it.
No. It's different.
Okay.
It's a different kind of
All
love.
right. According to Wikipedia, It Chapter 1 is a 2017 American supernatural horror film. It's so funny to hear it said that way, as though nobody's ever heard of this before. Based on Stephen King's 1986 novel of the same name, and that means that novel came out just 4 years before that miniseries did. The film is directed by Andy Muschietti and written by Chase Palmer, Cary Fukunaga, and Gary Doberman. It is intended to be the first of 2 films. The film tells the story of 7 children in Derry, Maine, who are terrorized by it, the eponymous being, only to face their own personal demons in the process. I'm going to mix it up a little bit this time. Let's get your opening thoughts. Just quick thoughts about where you're landing on this, what you thought, what your experience was like. Julia, Drew, Tony, and then I'll go. Julia, what are your opening thoughts?
Well, I was terrified to go see this film, and it did not help that we went to see it at the Alamo Draft House, where I walked by the theater on my way to the bathroom, and I caught in my peripheral vision, in the corner of my eye, a little child with a yellow rain jacket and a red balloon, and I was like, what the I don't know. I was like, I can't. That was creepy. And so then I come back, and sure enough, it's an actual kid going, "You'll float too. You'll float too." Completely straight-faced. I said, "Boy, you're creepy." Keep saying it. Oh my God, that was a creepy kid. Then I walk into the theater, and there is a Pennywise on stilts, creepy as hell. And he looks over at me, and I'm like, I took a picture of him, and he just looked at me so creepy. And then as I walked past, and people were posing to take pictures with him. And I'm like, oh hell no, I don't want to get anywhere near that thing. So that put me on edge already. This movie was terrifying. I thought it was so scary. Then I had to go someplace by myself after we watched the movie to a party like 40 minutes away. I was driving, and the roads here in Colorado the highways are not they're not lit up like they are in Texas. And so it's dark. I mean, just driving on the highways. So I just was like freaking out, expecting like some creepy clown to be somewhere on the side of the road or something. Anyway, terrifying film. I can't wait to talk about it.
Wonderful. Drew, I'm excited to hear what I mean. I think you were anticipating this like months before. You're like, listen, man, this is coming up. We got to start talking Stephen King again. So what are your thoughts?
I thought this was a great movie. I think this is one of the best Hollywood horror films I've seen in a long time. I was actually profoundly moved by parts of this movie, and I think that it discusses, without ever actually using the phrase, I think it deals with survivor's guilt in a very poetic way. And in certain parts of this movie. I was actually moved to tears. Strangely, I also find this movie extremely scary, and I don't even think I was expecting to find it as scary as I did, because I'm very familiar with the miniseries. I'm familiar with the books. I read the book. I know sort of the beats that were going to go down, but here was my experience upon entering the theater to watch this movie. I sit down, I go with my wife Jamie and the guitar player in her band Suna, and we sit down at the AMC Barton Creek in the mall, and the entire theater is packed except for the seat right next to me. The trailers run. This gentleman comes in right before the movie is starting. He's in dirty coveralls, and he's carrying a toolbox of all things. And he sits down right next to me, and I'm thinking, like, what the hell? My estimation in retrospect is that he was probably a mechanic and had just come directly from work, and tools are expensive, so he didn't want to leave them in his car. But needless to say, it was very,
maybe
very
he got
strange.
dropped off.
Yeah, or he's a shape-shifting sewer clown. Who knows? But the movie started, and the whole scene with Georgie, which I had been told was one of the tensest things in the whole film. I don't know why. I'm naive. I know how much special effects have progressed since 1990, but I was still expecting Pennywise to have kind of Dracula fangs the way Tim Curry did.
Yeah.
So when Pennywise leans back and his fangs start growing and he bites that kid's arm off, which I knew was going to happen, but I wasn't expecting it quite to happen like that, I audibly said, "Oh, crap!" like as loud as I could. And, I was really feeling really embarrassed. I was like, man, I am no lightweight when it comes to horror. I'm fairly jaded when it comes to this kind of thing, but that really caught me off guard because they really went there, and they have a kid crawling away from a storm drain on a stump, it's really gruesome. Yeah. And, I'm thinking, geez, I have this, macho mechanic, looking at me like, oh, man, look at this schmuck, And as the movie goes on, this guy is more, audibly frightened than anybody. He's shouting, "Don't go into that house! Don't open that door! Please! No more! No more! No more!" And I'm like, this is great, because not only did it make me feel better about what I did, but it really captures what I love about seeing these kinds of movies in the theater when you have a packed house. And it's this kind of communal thing where everybody's jittery and they're feeding off each other's energy. And it doesn't matter who you are, if you can just let yourself go and get into being scared, you could have a really, really great experience. And I actually walked away from this movie not feeling disturbed, but feeling really good.
Yeah.
I felt like I had confronted something, and I think that is what good horror does. And, I am somebody that's had loss in my life, and I think this movie deals with it in a very tasteful way, and I love that I had this experience, and I think this is a really special movie, and I'm glad that it's being well received.
Wow, that was fabulous. Okay, Tony, it's so funny. This is the exact group that we discussed the miniseries, a couple of years ago, whenever it was. So, we've got all the same people back here. What are your thoughts in seeing It 2017?
I think it's done really well. I don't know what it was, though. I'm still trying to figure this out because I saw it Friday night. I still feel kind of guilty. I think it's a really good adaptation. I think it's a really good horror movie. But it did not scare me really at all, which is really weird because everything there is scary and freaky. It's freaky stuff. And this isn't internet tough guy stuff. This isn't like, oh, I never get scared. My only thought is this: I've read the book several times. I watched the miniseries several times, and I just maybe being too familiar with the beats of it. I'm not sure because, again, and I've said this on several things, I think a lot of horror kids feel definitely in touch with the losers in the same way you might feel in touch with the Goonies or whatever. Things I liked in school were not popular ever. like I said, in kindergarten, I liked crazy Japanese stuff. And, later on, I liked stuff that's popular now. But at the time, like, I liked metal and I never really fit in. I wasn't goth enough or metal enough or any number of things. Right. So I fully, like, the novel really kind of reached out to me. And I also read a lot of Stephen King during that era, but something about it didn't scare me in the same way that other horror movies in theater have scared me. And I was like, and that like bugs me still. And I'm not sure what it was. I was actually more scared. There was a guy sitting next to me who was coughing and sneezing and stuff. And I was more scared of him getting me sick before Fantastic Fest.
Were you sitting next to the leper inquiring minds?
Yeah. That when he came on. Oh, by the way, I don't know if we prefaced this before, but like for real, if you haven't seen the movie, we're going to be spoiling the hell out of it. Like, don't listen to this if you plan on seeing the movie. Like, wait, get here, see the movie. We're warning you like so far in advance, even though we mentioned a couple things. Like, just see it first. I can't be more explicit about that. But yes, Drew, I when that came on, I was like, fuck, is this guy? I don't want to be Eddie in this theater. But I was really like, Fantastic Fest is 2 weeks away. Oh, don't you just better not. And I had to record the next day too. And I was like picturing me waking up sick because this dum-dum decided to go to the movie super duper sick and be patient zero for everybody, and I still have stuff to do. So but yeah, I think it's done extremely well. There's a few things I kind of wish they had made different. We can get into that later. I wish I was more scared of it. I envy people who are kind of coming into this the first time and were as freaked out as the guy with the toolbox, like, because there's a lot of really well done stuff. I wish it had been more impactful, but I don't blame the movie. I think it's totally on me,
I think I had a similar feeling, and I think, though, I can spin that so it's positive for both of us, actually, because to me, this was more like watching another Hamlet. It was like, oh wow, we had Mel Gibson, and now here comes Kenneth Branagh. Here comes Ethan Hawke. This is Hamlet, and I know what all this movie is going to do. So all along, I'm going, oh well, that's an interesting trick, and that was a cool element. And do I find it scary? Yeah, no, I totally do find it scary. I never once felt as though I was like inside of a story that I didn't understand, that I was watching a movie. I never had that.
Unless you're a sociopath, I don't think that's going to happen, Jason.
Well, no, but there have been lots of movies where it's so tense that I feel itchy in my seat. I feel scared. I want to get up. Stuff like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which has no gore whatsoever. Nevertheless, I feel very itchy watching that whole thing. Here, I was just having such a wonderful time. I loved this movie. I loved how the presentation of the late 80s, and we'll talk about that'll be our first topic. And in fact, let's spin right into it.
I want to respond to what you and Tony are saying, because I am also familiar with the book. I have also watched that miniseries probably close to 100 times. I think this is a really and I'm not saying it's wrong for y'all to feel the way that you do. I'm not. I'm absolutely not.
Well, I mean, I'd change it if I could.
Mileage, it's a your mileage may vary thing. I mean, horror, as I'm always fond of saying, is just as personal as comedy, and your reaction to it can have to do with your mindset at the time, where you are at your life, what you're going in, to experience, how you approach it, or, how you feel about a certain topic. And so, I think y'all experiencing that way is perfectly valid, and the fact that you're not blaming the movie is actually very that's smart criticism, because you're acknowledging that as a viewer, you are bringing your own mindset, and you can still say, well, this is still a very well done movie. But
I wasn't even disappointed in it. In other words, I guess what I'm saying is, to me, this movie, although it has a lot of horror elements to it and great suspense, ultimately, to me, this is almost an adventure film. I love it. I mean, I want to run around in this world. It's gosh, I realize I just said that, and it sounds just as obnoxious as that that jackwad that Tony was complaining about. Tony, you want to repeat what you read that was on the?
I don't think they were like. I've seen several feeds come through of different people who have expressed their disappointment that it's not more of a horror movie. The book is a horror book. The film is a horror movie. There's a kid who sees a scary clown who is, and I don't remember how all worked in the miniseries offhand because it was such a striking thing in the movie.
They cut it off. They cut it off. Just the miniseries is way more demure.
The kid gets his arm bitten off by a multi-jawed thing who disguises itself as a clown. The kid crawls around on a stump and gets pulled into the sewer. Yeah. Now, how does that sound like the freaking Goonies?
No, I know. That's true.
There was no Cyndi Lauper playing. There was no like, no, there was no sloth. That guy, the clown, he bites the arm off a child.
Yeah.
That's horror.
I think people, I've seen comments similar to that, and it's like, oh, I wish it was more hardcore. I wish it was much more gory.
Dude,
I wish
that's never this movie. That was never the book either, by the way.
This is the story. If you want to go make the interpretation of this, where the quote unquote losers club actually lose to Pennywise, that's fan fiction. That's not what this is. And
likewise, I can imagine a version that they're talking about. I guess that, by the way, that's not the point I was making at all. But I can imagine somebody saying that where they're like, I thought I was going to watch a killer clown movie. In other words, they want a slasher movie about a killer clown. This is
not body count horror, though. This never was.
No. This is many things actually, but I mean, it's you have a monster in town. There is an investigation. There's a team forms. There's an investigation of it, and I said adventure. It's horror. It's definitely horror. But my point is, I was loving it. Like the way I love some of the best Hammer horror, and you're here to watch this team come together. So was I scared at various moments? Sure, yeah, you bet. But to me, there's so much to love here. So I don't know.
So to Drew's point though, the difference is in this movie, and again, I still like all weekend I was like, why? Upon leaving and all weekend, I was like, why wasn't I more scared? Like, this is creepy and crazy, and it's fully. I liken it to the cave / tree looking, the tree looking cave in Empire. Like, you bring whatever Yoda tells Luke, you're bringing your own stuff. Like, don't bring your sword. Don't bring your lightsaber. He does anyway, so he brings all of his baggage along with him. And that's to me what the cinema is a lot of times. You bring in whatever is around you, on any given day that you come into the cinema. And the thing that didn't happen with this, and I was kind of disappointed in myself more than anything, was I never had it where the hair on the back of my neck rose up, or I'm just like biting my knuckles, like, oh.
No, I totally did. I had chills so many times. It was just.
I envy you, actually, Julia, because like everything in it should have done that. So it's totally on me. Like, this is not a judgment call on, because man, freaky crap happens. Things are scary.
Yeah,
lots of things.
Well, but here's Tony. Here's a thought actually, because we know that this movie is only covering the first half of a really long novel. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, there's not a great deal of suspense because that most of these characters are going to survive.
No, that's I think what I was also.
Yeah, that you're like.
Yeah, but I feel like the damage done is still like the kid breaking his arm to me was almost.
Oh, that freaked me out. Yeah.
Anything,
yeah.
There's. To me, like, I'm well past the point where the threat of death is the only thing that I look for in horror.
Point.
Because,
excellent.
Like, I think, like, the people who are wanting. Look, I love Friday the 13th movies, and those are the epitome of body count horror. They're all about how many people can Jason mow through in an hour and a half.
Yes, the kills.
Like that's what. But that's a specific kind of thing, and this is another kind of thing, and that's
I agree with you
okay.
completely.
Well, and so I want to comment a little bit on what you guys have been saying about, the whole Goonies and this, what you're saying now, Drew. For me, I feel like this film is terrifying on so many levels because I think it is effective in being terrifying as a horror movie with a demon that is disguised as a clown, but it's also terrifying in that these children who are a group of, they become a group of friends, but a group of children are targeted not just by the demon, but by possibly demon motivated, but at least non-demonic humans, these adults in their lives and these teenagers in their lives. And for me, partly as a parent and partly as just a human being, I was even probably more terrified by the fact that these kids are having these horrible life challenges to deal with. And that's the Goonies piece of it. It's they're living their lives and they're relating to each other and they're standing by each other. It's the Stand By Me too. Or not Stand By Me. But Stand By Me. That's the one, right? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely Stand By Me.
The idea that they're leaning on each other to try to get through this thing called life, whatever it brings them, and in some cases, what it's bringing is abusive parents or bullies or parents who have died or whatever it is, and then the other part, it's this horrible demon that also shows them whatever they're most afraid of and tries to kill them. So, I think it's effective on all those levels, and I think the book is as well as in the original miniseries. So I think it's all those things.
Yeah, the pack of like metal kids, and what's weird is like it wasn't those kids that were the bullies that I had to watch out for. I love metal, and that was my tribe.
Yeah.
We kind of stuck together. Those kids, I have actually a more visceral reaction because living through that and I didn't have it terrible. Again, we talked about this in Trick or Treat. Like I didn't have it like dude in Trick or Treat or whatever, but there's some of that perception. I definitely was, threatened and blah, blah, blah. Being any kind of outsider, that's how high school can work for you or not, But yeah, man, those kids, that's something that a lot of people have to deal with. And, giving the kid a knife, I luckily never had to deal with that. But all of that crap, man.
Yeah.
Like,
no, it's awful.
Scary and terrible and realistic. The racism.
Yeah.
Realistic. I lived in Mississippi. It sucked. Friends of mine were, people I knew hated on friends of mine behind their back. I didn't care. I only cared if you were cool or not, or a good, if we got along, if you were a jerk or not. But it was a big deal. And so all of that stuff hits really home.
When speaking of the character named Mike, who's the only black member of the Losers Club, and it's a very white town. This is Maine, so he's one of the few black families we're given to understand.
Right.
And so these boys, they yell something horrible at all. What drives these losers together is all of them are being picked on by the bullies. But what they have for Mike is get out of our town. And don't you think it's interesting that I found it really interesting that the way that is played in this film, it's clearly a racial thing, but I think it's written in such a way that if you are so naive as to not know exactly what is motivating these guys, you cannot, because they never call him any ethnic slur. They never you have to bring the baggage of having grown up in the United States to understand exactly why they don't like this kid. Of course, they're going to yell,
man. I think you're going to read it. It's done slightly ambiguous, but the get out of town is get out of our town. That's
true.
I see where you're coming from, but I still think like that's a real stretch. I think they were smart in the portrayal as far as getting a broad audience into the theater, but get out of our town and everything they say to him, like the fact there's not a racial slur in there is only because
because that would be deeply shocking. Let's face it, that would be deeply shocking if they were to call him a real racial slur.
They also skip I can't. This is a trigger word for some people. The number of times fag was thrown around in the 80s.
Yeah.
I was a recipient of that, and I've done a lot of thinking about that. Actually, the thing about a lot of those words, that was not me, right? But
Yeah.
what people say when they throw out slurs like that is it's not actually always the word. Because if you're as an adult, I wouldn't care because I'm firmly comfortable with who I am. But it's the threat of, hey, outsider, hey, I am violently opposed to whatever you are. These are the words I'm choosing to be opposed to that. I might actually strike out with violence against you, and these are the charged words that I'm using. And that, not having that, it was more physical violence in there. But that was very much
it's the same as pointing a gun at somebody. You're just saying, it's just it's threatening behavior. Absolutely.
Yeah, but I do remember we used to call. Listen, I can hold my hand over my heart and say I don't remember ever calling somebody a fag, but I do know that was a pretty common slur to call somebody.
Oh yeah.
And I actually believe that we weren't aware that there were any homosexuals actually in our schools, but obviously there were. Isn't that crazy?
All of that, and
I have to say, okay, like my older brother is gay. Like gay rights are a big issue to me.
Yeah.
I in a lot of contexts, use of that word makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But the way these kids were throwing it around is absolutely realistic for the time period.
Oh, absolutely.
I think as a not only a film goer, but as somebody who writes themselves, like I would prefer the authenticity of the language over, sort of sanitizing it.
Of course, it's not here in this film. This film doesn't use that. And you know what else this movie doesn't do? And we're about to get into the 80s. But if you remember the last one we watched, the children take place, in other words, the bulk of part one. This is really just like the miniseries and how it adapts it. How part one is the kids, and part two will presumably be the adults. But in the last version, I remember that the kids all use a lot of Maine expressions, a lot of sort of colloquialisms and weird like kid lingo that belongs only to them. And here there's none of that. These kids are very, very approachable and sort of like everyday and like you and me. Like, and I mean this in a nice sense, like you and me generically. They don't talk with the regional kind of feel that the last version.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of part of the book, and I think it's kind of interesting. But I mean, again, if you're going to make it more mass market, you kind of get rid of that. By the way, on the other topic, I firmly, unless anyone, think differently, I firmly prefer an era where people are more mindful of things they say.
Oh, yes.
Thought police kind of way, like, oh, we should all, but definitely there's a lot of things I'm happy that are left behind. Those are but a few of them.
If you were to do something that takes place in the past and present a lot more of the problematic stuff about the time that the story is not going to be about, like this story ultimately is going to be about things like bullying and grief and stuff like that. If you wanted to deal with all the other problematic things of society in the 50s or the 80s, the story would wind up kind of being about that. And in fact, to me, that's why it's fun to watch stuff from the 50s or whatever, and to think about all these issues that were not intended to be what the story was going to be about at the time. But now, they're aware of that enough that if you're like, hey, if these guys are going to be throwing around a lot of homophobic slurs all the time, we're going to have to deal with that because people are not going to just take that. And I'm totally
with how the movie, I'm totally cool with what parts of the 80s the movie keeps and makes reference to and embraces. Although, like I said, I am kind of sad because one of the police is wearing like an Anthrax shirt. I'm like, oh man, like don't ruin it, bully jerk. Although I'm sure in many places, like the metalhead kids were, you know, the bullies and the, you know, all the there's probably a bunch of Hesher kids who were jerks and never
Oh, it's all just a carousel, man. It's a carousel of the sim that you're setting up in your town, you know, and it's like, this guy's the bully, and what kind of music is he
Well,
into?
I think the bullies are rocker kids because in this version, because in the original they're greasers, and that's
right. No, it
80s
totally
equivalent.
Yeah.
If they weren't metalheads, they would have been punks. Like
oh yeah, dude. Like
Those
I
are-
totally
those
are
understand
your
why it
options.
is. It's just one of those.
Can you imagine how
Oh,
annoying
man.
that would be if they were like all like studded collar and mohawked and everything, like the bad guys in 1,000 actual 80s movies were, where
I think
like
it would be
the
a little
gang.
bit more a little unrealistic for.
Oh yeah,
totally.
especially for
Of course
Gary
it
and
would.
Minnie. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's how
But-
remember how Return of the Living Dead is with that gang of like ridiculously over treated and coiffed that gang was with their anyway. Okay, the 80s. This movie takes place in the 1980s, and I thought about so many things that are similar. Really, it turns out actually that the life in the 80s in a tiny town, if you're in high school, and by the way, I was in high school during the time that this movie takes place. You know, being in high school in a little town in the 80s looks pretty much like it did in the 50s. I mean, there's no online existence, right? So your life is entirely analog. Your life involves places that you can physically go to from one point to another at different times of day. You know, it's I completely bought it. The only difference between this and the 50s is the music has changed.
Oh man, and I
Well,
love people
there's-
taking solace in their Walkman.
Yeah.
I think
That worked for me.
I think there's a couple of big things that do change because of the change. First of all, I think they changed the change is a very shrewd move because what you were able to do by moving this into the 80s is you have people who are approximately the age of the Losers Club when the original miniseries came out. So you know, you're hitting.
There's actually some talk of having the actors who played the kids in this miniseries play the adult for this one.
Some of them are still working. Some of them are still working.
Well, except for the one who has died, but Bill has died already. But yeah, the others, I think that would be really, really cool. And also, by the way, this movie came out exactly 27 years after. Well, not exactly, but 27 years after the miniseries. And of course, the whole thing is that Pennywise comes back every 27 years. I think that's kind of an awesome.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Pretty good.
Trivia note.
Like by moving into the 80s, you hit the approximate nostalgia button of the people who are probably going to be buying tickets for this. You know, the other thing is the 80s is kind of a weird parallel of the 50s. There was a lot of 50s nostalgia in the 80s, and I think it clicks pretty well. And you know, I was a kid in the 80s and in the early 90s, so like it definitely makes me feel nostalgic. One thing that it does change, and I do find myself missing, is that the pop horror aspect of it is now completely absent. Like you don't
say more about that. What do you?
Well, in the original novel and in the miniseries, it changes into like popular movie monsters. He changes into the Mummy, into the Teenage Werewolf, and actually at one point Rodan, and you know all these. You know, crazy thing. And when they move it into the 80s, like he turns into the shark from Jaws. There's a whole scene with the Gill Man, Frankenstein's monster.
Yeah.
You know, like there's all these, you know, public domain monsters that, you know, that they can, like, things that are generic enough concepts that Stephen can use them without, you know, really infringing on anybody's copyright. You know, the Gill Man isn't generic, but because, you know, like you could say like, oh, it's a swamp monster, you know, it's there, you know. So you move it into the 80s though, the movie monsters that are really popular in the 80s are super specific. Like you couldn't have Pennywise turn into Freddy Krueger without there having to be some rights procured. You couldn't have him turn into Jason or Chucky or Pinhead or any of those characters that were the movie monsters of the day without there being somebody getting paid out And I do find myself missing that, aspect of it, because I thought that was really fun. And, I also kind of wonder if they thought, well, if we do that and, now it's in the 80s, people will be like, oh, Monster Squad, obviously. But having said that, I think some of the original creatures they come up with in this movie are really inventive and cool.
I absolutely think that one of the most interesting things I've ever seen in a film was this idea that the painting that the Jewish kid, I forget what his name is, but that's
Stan.
kind of what he's known for, is he's terrified of this one painting in his rabbi father's office that is deformed. I don't even know who did the painting, but it's sort of.
And I think that was an excellent capturing of stuff that kids actually do feel anxious about. We were talking about this on our drive home last night, and Jamie was talking about posters that were on her wall that like they weren't necessarily frightening during the day, but at night like she'd feel like they were looking at her. And I think that captures that very well. But like, it would have been cool to see Pinhead turn into at least one recognizable, or Pennywise.
But I just want to say what does happen with that is that, so this image comes off of the painting. So I've seen things where, films where the image either moves around or maybe just disappears. But this whole thing where it just becomes like a bigger than life-sized version of that, and then attacks him. Later on attacks him. But at that point, just scares the crap out of him. That was really clever. That was very, very, very inventive.
Yeah. No, I like that one a lot. But and I can't think of an example of that other than the stained glass monster in Young Sherlock Holmes. That's the only one I can think of where a character like comes right off the painting and starts walking around. That was cool. And looks and has exactly the form that it had in drawing. That was what's clever about that. It's one of those.
Play with that sort of scale thing a lot.
Yeah.
Like one of the most jarring things in the movie to me was when they're looking at the slideshow, and then Pennywise starts to appear in the slideshow, and then they try to shut the slideshow off, and they knock it over, and it keeps kind of clicking. And of course, you all know that he's probably going to appear because you've seen horror movies.
Yeah.
He appears as the exact same size. So he's gigantic. And that is so freaky.
No, I agree with you. And that's why I was like, again, during the movie, I was like, why isn't this scaring me more? Because holy shit, that is scary as hell. That was crazy. By the way,
and all the contortions that he does, he actually worked with, the actor actually worked with Bill Skarsgård's his name. He actually worked with a contortionist to try to make, because I'm sure, obviously some of it's going to be CG, but he actually worked with a contortionist to try to make himself more terrifying.
Painting that inspired by Modigliani. He does a lot of like twisted. I knew I recognized it, and I couldn't remember from art school, but
that's fabulous.
But there's a bunch of paintings, and they all have weird eyes and stretched out people. And there was a
thank
painting
you for that.
in the director's house.
That's like your first endorsement. Like just like go run off and take a look at it. Yeah. Okay, but I wanted to address this interesting thing that Drew just brought up though about Stephen King's particular thing, his fetish for contemplating the meaning of pop culture monsters of the 40s and 50s on the baby boom generation. That is a thing that he likes to write about over and over and over again, right? But it's not part of this movie because it's just not. It's first of all, it's a very sort of contemplative thing that Stephen King's interested in talking about, but is not central to the thesis of this film. But it's totally there. I mean, I would even go so far also as to suggest, because I've interviewed people who have studied the whole monster craze of the 50s, that the monster craze has never been repeated again. There's been moments with like when there's both Pinhead and Freddy, and there's that big thing going on in the 1980s, but it is nothing like the explosion of monster and wacko ro-fi car culture in the 50s, and that's just gone. I mean, and I also kind of mourn it, but it's to do it, you would really have to put the film back in the 50s, I think.
Well, or again, you would have to bring in contemporary monsters, which creates its own set of problems.
But it's just not as much a part of the culture. I get that for Monster Kings.
I mean, I was a monster-loving kid, but like, so maybe it's a little bit like, I mean, there was a 1-800 hotline where you could call Freddy Krueger, Jason. Like,
No, I dig that.
I
dig
was
that.
huge in the 80s.
I dig that there was a big horror scene in the 80s. And I also understand that you would not sell it all short, because I know that you're a big fan of both eras. So I totally, in other words, but I just firmly believe that the television explosion that happened with The Late Show and Dracula and Frankenstein and the creature coming around in the 50s, and the fact that there was not a lot of other pop culture for young people, so that monster culture became reflexive culture. It was the culture for young people in the 50s, and that's just not the case in the 80s.
I think the big thing by changing this, because we could argue this and take
you're right. We're not going to get into that. Yeah.
But I think the big thing by changing that, by removing the pop horror part of it, is like one of the big things in the book and in the miniseries is that they decide that Pennywise picks up aspects of the things that he turns into, and one of the things he turns into is a werewolf. So they're going to kill him with a silver slug.
Yeah.
It's a shot through this slingshot, but that Bev, the girl, is really good at firing. That's gone. Like, they've replaced it with a different thing. They replaced it with a rail gun.
Yeah, it's like a bolt gun that they use for
from a meatpacking plant, which I thought was cool. I mean, I thought that was cool, and especially like having grown up in a town where there's like farmers and this sort of having seen this sort of thing going on, like I did think that was a neat replacement for it. But part of me, I would have liked to have seen some of the more specific monsters. I do miss that from the miniseries and from the book, and I think that I know, like, now that if they do a sequel, and I'm sure they will, like, that's just not going to be in there, and I miss it, and I don't know if anybody else felt the same, but that is the one thing I did find myself missing in the movie, even though I thought that the creatures in this movie were really cool. Like,
and they've gone farther back. I mean, instead of those very specific memories of like being afraid of the Wolfman or afraid of the creature, they've gone farther back to very sort of things we don't know about, really, like strange industrial explosions of the 19th century and the victims of that, or house fires and all this sort of.
Well, and the house fire thing, really ties into this whole larger thing of like survivor's guilt, which plays out through the entire movie. And, that's something that the miniseries didn't really deal with in any deep level. I mean, it's there because it's inherent, but like I said, look, I'm speaking to someone that has lost a brother, like, I got choked up so many times during this movie. So, like, I think the fact that they, in some ways, like removing like the monsters, you're right. It opens them up to get into these sort of weird psychological things. So, and I guess I always have the miniseries to go back to, like, so I can have my cake and eat it too. No pun intended.
Well, that's for sure. Tony, what were you going to say?
Oh, I thought myself, like, I see where Drew's coming from, but for me, the change to very personal monsters, I think that works in some ways better, especially in an age where, like, I mean, we've talked about this before. I'm not going to watch black and white movies. So you have a whole generation of people who may or may not give a crap about the retrospective we just had.
And to be sure, you don't mean you mean that's a common refrain you hear.
Yeah.
Over and
I'm
over
just
again.
like, so all of those monsters may or may not work. But every person understands the scary painting, the tree knocking against the wall, the person you saw that freaked you out.
Right, and it's timeless. It's timeless. You'll be able to watch it 30 years from now and not be like, wonder what that was supposed to be about.
Yeah. I mean, I once saw this woman and I felt bad. I was old enough to not really get scared, but I always felt bad. Like there was an instant shock reaction. A woman who had a skin disease where I haven't looked up what this is, or I looked up years ago and I can't remember, but it basically looked like her face was wax melting. And I was old enough to where I felt this must be awful for this person, like whatever reaction I had of like, that person has to experience that all the time, and they seem perfectly normal and nice and everything like that. But those are the kinds of things you if I'd been younger and seen that as a kid, that probably would have had a different impact on me. Like, that what is that? All that. So all of that fear of unknown stuff with the leper, etc. Again, the Mike's survival guilt, which doesn't happen in the book. He's racism and everything is going on, but his parents are around. At least his dad is, for sure. I think bringing that to a more personal level is actually a pretty smart move as far as an adaptation goes. Again,
no, it totally works. I'm not saying it doesn't. It totally works. And again, like I have there's the book, there's the miniseries, like, and I like that there are now all these different versions of this story. I think that like people like to act like there needs to be like, this is the one definitive version. And I'm somebody, like, as long as it's done well, like I like seeing reinterpretations of things.
Absolutely. I can see new versions of something over and over and over again. Absolutely. Yeah.
As long as it's good.
Like there's this whole thing going on social media right now about, like Tim Curry versus Bill Skarsgård. And I like them both. I think that they both put in really excellent performances. I will say, it's Bill Skarsgård had to work hard because, like Tim Curry got to scare me when I'm a little kid. Bill Skarsgård had to work harder. But like it's almost a shame he's under so much makeup because this is a star turn. Like he's
it's a great. He's not trying to do a Tim Curry impression. In fact, on purpose, he's trying not to do one. In fact, Tim Curry had been offered the opportunity to do this, to reprise the role himself, and he turned it down. So he's doing completely different, and it's effective. I love that they separated him. They kept him isolated before they started shooting, so that everybody would be scared of him and turn up. He actually felt really bad about it because he was like sad to be missing out on the fun of getting to know people that he enjoys about the movies. But it was super effective because everybody was terrified of him. So even the actual people that he's working with are on a set and they know this is all play. Like I said, I was super scared of the sound at the movie theater.
He's able to do this one thing with his eyes, and I've seen a lot of people talking about it, that he can like separate his eyes.
Oh, that was creepy as hell. That was great, by the way. I noticed that.
It made him look like a big lizard. And I think like the thing that I will say this, the thing that really they hammer home in this version is that Pennywise is just an appendage of like a larger thing, and it's not actually a clown, it's an approximation of a clown. It's a otherworldly thing who doesn't fully understand what it is to be human. And doing this sort of twisted approximation, and the way he talks and the way like he looks, and like he does an excellent and Julie was talking about the way he contorts his body, and even though they sometimes enhance that with CG, like it really gives you an idea that this is like a non-human creature.
Okay. Go back to the Georgie conversation. The Georgie conversation, when that creature who is wearing a clown body is trying to have a conversation like humans do.
Well, here's what's even crazier.
Amazing.
So one thing, like, being an animator, you're trained to spot things that are weird in your animation. And that's why some CG doesn't work, and you'll see something and you won't know exactly what it is that's wrong. But if you watch, it's caused me to watch people's gaits, for example, when they walk around. You just like, that just becomes part of what you look for. Like, is this walk cycle this way or that way? And so anytime like I find it fascinating when people go, something's off. So when you see his eyes the first time and they're slightly like skewed, that was brilliant because it is a thing of like, and you know, sociopaths and people who have you know, social disorders and you know, some serial killers, etc., have that like, I'm really trying to engage with you as a human, but I kind of am missing the parts that make me, whether it's I'm missing context clues or I don't quite understand how to turn a phrase in a way that doesn't make me sound more robotic or less empathetic. Like I like empathy, and therefore when I say things, they just kind of come out wrong and kind of either stabby or like, whoa, why would you say that? And so this creature has that affectation as well, and it's creepy. But the eye thing, starting with that, was super like, that's one of the first things I spotted as like, oh, that is a really good thing. Also, like super creepy. Also, I don't, you know, people again, you can have, we live in a world that's had, you know, many years of cinema and adaptations. You don't have to not like, why do you even have to argue? Is objectively, I understand like having the argument, like, you know, we get together, we have this podcast, you know, we're friends and we talk about things, but there doesn't have to be an either or on any of that. And in fact, I think this Pennywise, you know, without kind of the way Tim Curry played it, we probably wouldn't have this Pennywise.
Oh, absolutely. Like Tim, so I think even more than the book, like Tim Curry is what made Pennywise a pop culture icon.
Sure. And why do you have to have either or? To me, that's like one of the, I don't understand the argument, especially when it's done pretty well.
Sure.
Like I've seen a bunch of adaptations of manga and anime, and from Japan, mind you, that are terrible. The Devilman movie, there's a couple bits. I don't know what they were adapting. Like, I don't see how you could like Devilman and make that the Gatchaman movie. Just, man, the costumes look good, but holy crap. And on and on and on and on. But like, if each is good, and arguably Tim Curry is the shining point, like you'll see many, many reviews of the miniseries. And almost all of them go, if they're going to be negative, they go, man, budget sucked. A lot of acting sucked. Tim Curry, though, man, you can't touch that. Like, unanimously, Pennywise from the miniseries is creepy as hell. And that's probably why a lot of people actually are afraid of clowns. Less that they're afraid of clowns and more that they're scared of
Tim Curry as Pennywise. Punch in 1990. I think it was the 1-2 punch of 1989 and 1990. If you're talking about like how this really, because I think people have always been mistrustful of clowns. I will make
all right, let's shift over to the clown thing.
Let me finish, and I want to go back because I want to keep talking about Pennywise before we go into this whole larger thing. Okay. I think you had Jack Nicholson as the Joker and Tim Curry as Pennywise a year apart from one another, and I think that might have submitted it. I might have submitted that. It's interesting to me that we even have a movie theater with a marquee of Batman on it.
Yeah, we do. That's right.
But okay, I want to say one more thing. The scene that I thought was so effective in showing what this creature actually is. Actually, there's two things, and I want to get these thoughts out because I don't want to move on and not say these things. Okay. There's the scene in the basement where Bill kind of goes down, and what he confronts initially is a flooded basement where he thinks he's talking to the ghost of his brother Georgie, and the Georgie ghost starts going, "You'll float too, you'll float too, you'll float too," like he's a record that's on skip, and his face starts to contort and rot, and then Pennywise stands up, and Georgie's coming out of his arm like he's a sock puppet, and Pennywise rises through the water, chasing Bill up the stairs, and then sort of slunks over and is pulled away as his eyes roll up, almost like he's a sock puppet too. And I thought, like, that is it right there, because it's not the clown. The clown is just something it likes to dress up as. And you know, it might as well just be another puppet, but it's its preferred puppet. Now there's like another thing, because like this because this had more money than the miniseries. The one thing they were absolutely able to get into more was the reality altering aspects of it. And there's this thing that they subtly build towards through the movie is you have people keep walking by these TVs and there's a children's show playing and you'll only
what the hell was that?
Genius. That was
and you'll
genius.
get to hear it, and it's like, the sewer is a fun place to play. What was your favorite part? The clown. You know, the kids like start saying the clown, the clown. And it's only on in the background. It's only on in the background. So you get the sense that people throughout this town are being subtly subjected to this thing.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's what I said at the beginning, is that I think that the adults that are, and the teenagers even, that are being so evil or at least useless are being influenced by the demonic forces that have controlled the town for centuries.
That is not something they really were able to show effectively.
Yeah.
In the miniseries, that this is something that is not just shape changing; it kind of has limited control over reality. And then you finally have that scene where Henry Bowers walks in, and the show commands him to murder his father, which he does.
Yeah.
That was phenomenal, like threading throughout the entire movie.
Yeah.
And
you're absolutely right. Yeah.
I thought that like I said, that is the one thing that hands down. Like I don't care how emotionally you're attached. Look, I like the miniseries a lot too. I don't care how emotionally attached you are. That is something that they just didn't have the money or the time to do in that. Like this.
I agree. I mean, I want to talk about the comparatively the shortcomings of the miniseries, and I do think we should spend a couple of minutes on it in a sec. But really quickly, I want to talk about this clown thing, because I am so okay. I'll say this, and then we'll see how unfair I'm being. I am so tired of the trope of how astonishing it is that people find clowns scary. First of all, it's not interesting. People have been talking about it since I was a child. Second of all, I don't find clowns scary. I never found clowns very interesting. It's weird. It's like it's just one of these like rote things, like complaining about the VCR being always at noon. It's just this cliched bullshit thing that people like to say to sound smart.
This is
all right,
one of those
now,
things.
go ahead.
When we did the miniseries.
Did we?
Jason, this is one of those things that people like to listen to our podcast to hear me do, and that's to say, you're just wrong. You're just wrong. The clowns are terrifying because the whole idea of clowns is not only are they behind masks and they're the unknown, which is what we like about things like Michael Myers and Jason, but they are also exaggerated. Their faces are exaggerated versions of smiling. So they're not even just everything is exaggerated about their face, but it's not just exaggerated in a horrific way. It's exaggerated as if they're gleeful about what they're doing. And so when you make what they're doing be terror, that is so much more terrifying, because it's like, not only are you a terrible person, but you're happy about it.
Yeah,
whereas if they're just regular, they're just doing a regular performance, then they're just exaggerating whatever that is.
Okay, horror icon Lon Chaney. This is a quote, and I think this is important to the context of it specifically. Okay. He said, and I'm paraphrasing, a clown in a circus tent is funny.
Yeah.
But if you were to open your door after midnight and see the same clown in your front yard, it would be terrifying.
Absolutely.
No doubt about it.
I think the important thing about that, in the context of this story, what Stephen King did, because people like to act like Stephen King invented the scary clown, and he didn't. We were just talking about the Joker, for one thing, who might debatably be the OG scary clown.
Well, there's a clown in Poltergeist.
Yeah,
I mean, that's scary as hell.
Well,
yeah.
But I mean,
there's a clown in Poltergeist. That's scary as hell.
There's scary clowns throughout pop culture. Like throughout, probably even beyond that. But what Stephen King did, and I think both adaptations of it really hammer home, is that a clown in a place that a clown should not be, immediately makes your brains go, it becomes surreal. It makes you uncomfortable. So if you're walking along and it's raining and there's a clown in a storm drain, that immediately makes you go, what the huh?
But that's because
You know?
Stephen King is really good at this stuff. I mean, you can take the formula that Lon Chaney said, and he's darn right. And so a scary clown can be scary. But if you open your door at 1 o'clock in the morning and a milkman is standing there, he'll be scary too. You know, if I open it at 1 o'clock in the morning, you know, I don't know. I'm trying to think of another
But
example.
here's the thing. This is the reason why Julia is right. Like, this is the reason why the Joker is the most popular supervillain, is because someone who is happy 100% of the time, 100% of the time, would be horrible to be around. And I think that is something that this movie really does a good job with. Is that
I guess that's true.
Pennywise's glee veers into being hateful after a while.
But it's such a cliche. Oh my God!
No, okay, Jason. Here's a no. You okay? I'm gonna also be the anti your thesis here.
Yes.
Do you or do you not remember?
Yeah.
Going to the all-night movie marathon, trying to win but-namathon tickets, where the clown guy, random clown in the fucking place, after having gone through a state hospital to get there, clown mask puts a seat beside us, a boat seat or whatever, like a seat from something else, and drinks like the little tiny Heineken keg, pulling up his mask from time to time, wandering off into the woods from time to time, hopefully to, relieve himself and not to murder people or wreak havoc. Do you or do you not remember being, man, that guy is creepy as hell?
Yes, no, it's true.
It is true, and you know why? The guy was creepy.
Clown in the woods next to us was a scary drunk clown.
So, and I have friends who are actually like scared of clowns, like really.
Yeah.
No, Jason, you're saying that it's
slightly twisted. That it's a thing that is for children that is no longer for children.
Good point. That's a good point.
You're saying that it's cliche. You're saying that it's cliche is like saying ghosts and vampires and witches are cliche. I mean, it is terrifying. Period.
I'm not saying it's not effective, and I'm not saying that it's not that Stephen King didn't handle it brilliantly. Certainly, all of those things are true. What is cliche to me is the breathless articles that I'm reading all the time from people as though they have just today, in September of 2017, discovered the irony that clowns can be scary, which I just find.
Well,
as I get,
I don't know why you're surprised. Have you've seen the internet, right? How the internet and endless regurgitation of things.
Yeah, no, that's true.
To prove that they're.
I think my main problem is that as I get older and older, I find like 99% of everything tiresome. I think is what's happening. Is that like it just gets really hard.
Old man.
There's a pull quote. There's your pull quote. Jason Henderson, 99% of everything.
In your mid-40s, you're too young to be a grumpy old man already.
I don't.
Yeah, that was like a Mark. Are you turning into Mark Murin now? Like that was like something I would see. Like Jesus. Everything's so tiring, and ice cream can go fuck itself.
Or Louis C.K. I mean, who is it? Louis Black. I was thinking of Louis Black.
Anyone of those curmudgeonly stand-up comedians.
Okay.
There's so much people.
Can we should talk about the loser instead of having this argument.
Yes.
For the second time, we should talk about the Losers Club.
It's like this is a remake of the old It Part 1
Well,
episode.
there you go. So, while the movie's an adaptation, this is a remake. This
is unnecessary. This is unnecessary. Let's talk about the Losers Club.
Yes.
Yeah.
Please.
Okay. Oh, so you know what? Who wants to take? I mean, Drew, do you want to describe? Tony, who wants to kind of describe how they come together? Any way that you want to describe them is great. You can talk about your favorite actors in them, or how they.
I gotta give I can't remember the kid's name, but I gotta give a shout out to the guy who plays Richie. Because he's also on Stranger Things, and I think it's kind of funny.
His name is the delightful Finn Wolfhard.
Yeah, I think it's funny how this kid is now. His childhood is being submerged by a fake '80s childhood, with added monsters.
Yeah, that's right.
That's what his book is gonna be about eventually.
Yeah, you're right. He's spending his life in a Stephen Kingy kind of 1980s with bicycles and and
Monsters.
monsters and denim. Yeah.
I like him, but
Okay.
I like Eddie. I love how Eddie is just this, like, speaking of curmudgeonly comedians or whatever, he's like this, tiny version of a curmudgeonly comedian. Like, and another thing, you know what else I have to say about this? He's just, everything is about complaining about what the risks are and what's wrong with this and how many ways I could die here. In fact, it reminded me of my parents, because my parents look at every situation and go, here are all the ways we could possibly die here. And
Yeah.
I was watching, I was like, are you my parents?
I've probably
Yeah.
also been that person at least a few times, which
Yeah.
probably led me to doing tech stuff too, because I have to go. People go, "What if I do this?" And you're like, "No. If you do
Right.
that breaks these 10 other things. So
Yeah.
let's find a way to do that, but not the way you want to do it." And I think that's actually not my day job. So
I have a question about some stuff because I want to make sure that because I feel like I get the book and the miniseries turned around sometimes. So Tony, you may be able to school me here. And did they? Because I remember the black kid, Mike.
Mike.
He was the scholar on the history of the town.
yeah, in the book, and he's not in this one. I don't know why they moved it. I'm not sure why.
I think it's to give
it.
Ben something to do.
I guess.
But also it'll provide greater irony, because if several times Mike has lines in here where he goes, well, I'm the outsider. So if we get to chapter 2 in like 2 years or whenever it is, and it turns out that he's the only one who never left Derry, that'll be kind of cool. Of course they might switch it around and he doesn't become the librarian at all, but that's what should happen. That's what's supposed to happen to Mike, is he'll become the librarian.
Okay, so I am remembering that right. So okay,
Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I was slightly troubled by that, and that they took away an intellectual skill from an African American character, because
Yeah, that was weird to me. But
it kind of downgraded, and and this is by no means saying that the movie is not well done, but I didn't understand why that was grafted onto a white kid who already has an arc in place in the book, because you have the sort of weird...
Okay, I'm not like you guys. I haven't seen the miniseries a million times. I've only seen it maybe twice. Twice, because I saw it once when it came out, or possibly 3 times. But anyway, and I haven't read the book in a long time. I don't remember very much about it at all. So I don't see it that way. I see it as giving, the other kid, the new kid, the chubby kid, something to redeem him, basically, to this group, so that he has a purpose. Because the rest of them have been there. They have. I mean, what Mike has is he lost his parents in a fire in a tragic, horrible way, and so he has, like you said, survivor's guilt, and he's got this history now. But the other kid doesn't have any history there because he just got there. So he needs to bring the history by literally knowing the history.
And maybe that's fair, but look, I think just taken with the movie, viewing it by itself and not bringing any political or social commentary into it, the movie works fine. But
go ahead, sorry.
No. What were you gonna say?
I think I agree with you, and I was like watching the movie, and I had to actually go back and check. I'm like, wait, Mike had the thing, right? Like Mike had the history. So I went back. My thing, and maybe I don't know if we're gonna do the whole arc of the movie, but I wish that Bev had been more of a part of everything until the end. They
damsel and breast her. They turn her into Sleeping Beauty, essentially, which was a weirdly European flourish in this very American story.
I hadn't thought about that.
Having her be part of it, a major part of it in the book. I mean, obviously there's other weird ass crap in the book that I'm perfectly fine with cutting, because that's always been strange.
Sure.
But
apparently, Tony, tell me if this is correct. Ben had mechanical skills in the book. And that is apparently.
I think it's been a while. I don't remember.
I clearly got to go read this book.
He becomes an architect. Oh
yeah, that's right.
When he's older.
Right.
And he helps them design. You know what?
I'm not talking about when he's older. I'm not talking about when he's older. I'm saying, what is Ben's contribution to the youth squad?
He helps them build a dam. Like, they have this project of building a dam. And he's the one that helps them do that because he's good.
So that's probably why then they gave him this, because when they took that away, they went, well, we got to give Ben something to do. And they're like, why don't we give him the town history? Because now we're giving Mike this whole, story with his parents.
Interesting.
And, like, they left it open for Mike to take up the mantle because he says, like, oh, my grandfather says this town is cursed. So, like, there's there to where, like, if they choose to follow the book as closely as possible, they can do that. But, again, I think as a unit, the kids work fine. And I think that, the scene at the end where they come together and wail on Pennywise is amazing. Like I again, I know people are like, oh, I wanted it to be this sort of like hardcore horror thing. You're not going to get this scene like that if it's like they had tried to
that is one of my favorite scenes that I've ever seen ever is when you have, what did we say the comedian kid's name?
Richie,
when you have Richie say, like, appear that he's maybe going to give up and leave because Pennywise has said, hey, you know what, if you guys leave now and let me have Bill to myself, then I'll spare you. But if you stay, I'm going to kill all of you. And Richie had already said earlier, I'm done, I'm out of this. So he's like, oh, I told you. He's like, you made me do this, you made me do that, you made me do the other. And he's like, and now you're going to make me kill this fucking clown. And he picks up a stick and just starts bashing him. Oh, I love that scene. I actually applauded. I was like the only person who applauded. I thought everybody would applaud. But
that was a better action hero moment than a lot of proper action movies have, because like
I agree.
It was trying to be evocative of that sort of, Kippy Eye, yay motherfucker thing from one of the Die Hard movies. But when he says, welcome to the Losers Club, asshole, like, if you do not cheer a little bit of that,
totally,
you're made out of stone. What is wrong with you? Just like, but at this point in the movie, Pennywise has been like, okay, like that's when we're talking, when Jason is saying like adventure, like that is definitely adventure moment. Yeah. But the reason why this is still horror is to get to this point, to earn this, you have to go through the whole sequence in the house on Newbolt Street, which is super, like, that is like the most hardcore, twisted, turny, haunted house that has never actually been captured on film until now.
And it's very high tension. Oh God, how wonderfully non-boring this movie is. It's very, very tense when they're in with those monsters, and with the visions and the ghosts and everything. It ticks along. I mean, there's so much just good thinking in how this thing is written and filmed and just keeps going.
And I like how that is the moment when the whole, because obviously, I say obviously, to me, the main theme of this film is you got to face your fears. You can't just run away from them. And so the whole idea that they're going to go into this house and face the fears that they have, because that's the only way they can think of to defeat this demon. And so they go in, and literally at the point when he has Beverly, I guess it is, or is it Beverly that he has at the moment with the scary, not scary at all doors?
No, that's one of the other girls that has gone missing from this school.
Yeah,
he's got some, but no, he's got Beverly. Who was it? He's got one of them.
Ripson.
And he's about to kill them.
I might be saying her name.
He's got Rich. Well, he's got Eddie.
He's got Eddie. Yeah, it wasn't Beverly. It was Eddie. And so he's got Eddie, and he's going to kill him. And the other boys are behind 3 doors that they have to choose from. One says scary, one says very scary, one says not scary at all. And they go to the not scary at all, and it's terrifying because it's the girl, like you said, it's the girl one of the girls who'd gone missing is hanging there, and she's. But they close the door, but then they open it again. And at that moment, you see Pennywise look up like, what the hell? They weren't supposed to open that door again. That's supposed to be a thing that scares them away, and I shouldn't have to. Why did they do that? And you could just kind of see that he's like, there's something wrong here. They're getting less scared of me, and this is a big problem. And I think that's when I think that's a big turning point of the film. because they've all at this point, well, not all, but almost all have at this point confronted the thing that really was scaring them in their real lives. Beverly's confronted her dad, and
well, the dad stuff really happens. Like a lot of the more harrowing stuff with it, and I think that's a whole other topic. But like,
yeah. No, you're right. They don't defeat him in the house, and I believe it's because they haven't faced their real fears in their real lives yet. So then when they come back, they have. That's what I think is happening, because they have to have gotten to that point.
I want to say this. Like, again, keep talking about this whole thing about how it's dealing with this feeling of survivor's guilt. And like, there's the speech that Bill gives before they go in the house about how, like, it will be easier to go into this haunted house with a real monster in it. And they know this to be fact. Then they go into his own house because he knows that he's going to see this empty room where his brother used to be. And he will see his brother's things. And he knows he won't be there. God, that cut so deep with me. Like, I was like, wow. And like, this is when I say that this is a special movie. Like, that is such good writing, and to be able to really nail what something feels like, and without getting like pop psychology about it or too on the nose, just like really hit that. In a way that a lot of dramas don't. Like, 'cause this is a monster movie. Like, I just...
Well, and the way the father, like, addresses him and says, don't let your mom see all this crazy obsession stuff. Don't, it's the father who's going through this pain. It's funny to me how in this movie, the adults are either monstrous or more or less absent. But in that case, the father's got the same guilt and worse that the child does, but he's unknowable. He's just kind of, we have the moment when he's there in the basement, but otherwise he's invisible. He's not playing an active role in his son's life.
Yeah, he's defeated. But go ahead.
Well, it's like, the line that Pennywise says when Bill and Richie finally get into that room is like, is this real enough for you, Bill? It was real enough for Georgie. Like, again, it just brings like so many things, like the way this all just ties together,
Absolutely.
Like the reality of loss, like, like when my brother died, like I remember that first day after, like getting out of bed was like next to impossible, because it was like, it didn't feel real. It didn't feel real. And, so like the question of, is this real enough for you? Like, I just, like there's the on the nose read of that, which is like, oh, well, you don't believe, you're not going to believe that I'm a monster, well, here I am, there's on the nose read of it, but then there's like all this stuff underneath. And I know Stephen King kind of hates that kind of read of his material, but I think because it is an adaptation, I think it's completely fair to really like look into what is being said here. So I think it's a really special movie.
I think your reading of it is very fair. In fact, I think it's completely right. And I'm not sure what to make of. Sometimes King does disagree with readings, but sometimes I think he just feels like spending too much time discussing it takes away the power of it. But I don't know. Stephen King himself he changed his mind from interview to interview because he also, was an English teacher. So clearly he spent a fair amount of time discussing the themes of different works.
But
golly.
So I agree that I think that the whole idea that Bill is dealing with the death of his brother, the survivor's guilt, and also just the grief and all that. That's his thing that he has to confront, and he can only confront that when they're actually in the lair of in the well, in the lair of Pennywise. But the others, they have to confront their stuff in the real world. So you've got Eddie, who has to confront the fact that his mom has something like Munchausen's by proxy, where she's been telling him that he's sick her whole life so he doesn't leave her, but he's not. So then he has to confront her and be like, oh, yeah, no, turns out I'm not sick. Screw you. I'm going to go out and you can just deal with it. And then of course, the horrific scene. Oh my gosh, that poor Beverly has to have. Well, she has a couple of horrific scenes. She's got the one with the
Explain the
blood coming
relationship
up
with
out
the
of his face.
dad. For those who haven't listened to our last discussion of the miniseries, the dad is sexually obsessed with his daughter. Is he already molesting his daughter, or is he just?
I don't believe he is, because first of all, she says, "I've only ever been kissed once, and it was a nice kiss." So if he is, she doesn't think of him as kissing her, which is a possibility. But also, it's just when he even touches her hair, she immediately cuts her hair off, and I feel like she was so disturbed by him doing that was a trigger. And I think if he had been molesting her, that wouldn't have been such a trigger. It would have just been something else that he did. So
Yeah,
I don't know. I hope he's not. But he's clearly been super troubling toward her, and it bothers her a lot. And then of course he does try to rape her, and so then she smacks him on the head with the porcelain, I guess the toilet lid, and doesn't apparently kill him, but comes close to it. So she confronts him, and he was telling her, "Am I your little girl? Am I still your little girl? Are you still my little girl?" And she's like, "No, I'm not," which was her big thing. So they each have a thing. I don't know that every single person is their thing is shown completely, but you get the idea. And then you've got another one of my favorite scenes. There's so many good scenes in this movie. Is when Mike is told by his dad that he has to be willing to put the bolt in the head of the.
Well, that's his grandfather.
His grandfather. Yeah. He's got to be willing to put the bolt in the head of the cattle of whatever, I can't remember if it's a goat or sheep, but a sheep, I guess. He's got to be willing to do it because somebody's going to do it. You're going to be on one side or the other of the gun at any given point in your life. You're going to be on one side or the other, and you need to be the one holding the gun because otherwise they'll be holding it on you. And I thought that was a really interesting scene, and I think especially if you do consider the racial piece of it, because for sure, I think I would say anyway that black people have been on the wrong side of the bolt much more than they've been on the holding it. And so when he says that, and then the kid confronts both his bully, the teenager, what's his name, the one that falls down the well,
Henry Bowers.
Henry. He confronts him and also Pennywise with. Actually, it's not him that ends up shooting Pennywise, but he's the one who brings the weapon. I think he's got several things. He's not just confronting his survivor's guilt, but he's confronting this this need to decide whether he's going to be which side of the gun he's going to be on, and at any given point. I don't know. I just think all those scenes we could talk about them for hours, but to me they were also interesting. All these facings of the fear, if you will.
This thing of the Pennywise, or the actual it that wears Pennywise as a disguise, needing people to fear him.
Mm-hmm.
That scene where he notices like, oh crap, people aren't fearing me. Man, I actually this is something I've thought about a lot. I wish we could do that on the internet, because you'll get jackasses who say something, and then there becomes this endless cycle where we talk about it and blah blah blah, and thus proving their point and really pushing them forward. And man, oh man, I wish there was a way. That genie's out of the bottle. But we give so much power to these jerk-offs that I wish we could do the horror movie thing of just turn away. Because most of the time they are looking for this, like every time, like I'll see people and they'll repost and this and that. I'm like, no, you're doing exactly you're doing exactly what they want. This is what gives them power. And I wish we could
hilariously, we even call them trolls. We call them trolls, like they're folkloric monsters that follow those rules. Continue.
And
I think this is brilliant.
That aspect, and it's not new. It's just that it spreads so much more quickly through social media, etc. That everybody's guilty of it. I can't say I've never done that. But when I see things, I'll often purposely not repost, because I just can't stand for this jackass to be in my feed. I don't like it anyway, and I don't want to contribute. I wish we could somehow collectively pull this like Pennywise, make them, and it usually makes them fight like they're back to the corner at that point, and they scream and yell and go, "I'm relevant," and they post something else that's just more insane than something previously that they said. But just all of this stuff where we collectively give these things power, and that strikes home as an adult in as much as it does that we give these horrific things power. There are many things I was afraid of as a kid that now I'm just like, why was I ever afraid of that? I have so much more pressing. I have so many more pressing matters as an adult that it seems ridiculous that I would even care about something so asinine as this. But it was a big deal as a younger individual. And I wish there was a way collectively we could, do that whole. I want to make all the jackasses of the world have that look that's on Pennywise's face that Julia describes, where he's like, wait oh no, like this is really not good for me. But it's one thing that bothered me almost as much as anything else, and this is me being the super like
go crazy
music nerd, metal, like, and I'm one of the very few people who will think about this, but the Anthrax song that they play when they're throwing the rocks, right? Because the guy has an Anthrax shirt on that is of the time, but the song that they play during the rock throwing thing, and of course that's not like they're listening to it on the radio, so it doesn't really matter.
What was it? I can't remember.
Antisocial, which is a cover of a Trust song.
Oh yeah,
but it hasn't been made yet where they are, and that bugged me because I started growing up like that song, that tape I got that had Antisocial on it was later than the time period that they're in, and for some reason,
but like Jason says, it's not. What's the word, Jason? Diegetic? What's the?
No. You're totally right, and I'm at peace with that. But like the music nerd, metal nerd, like in me, was just really like, wait a second. And I had to go home and look it up. I'm like, that wasn't out yet, right? Now, the Trust song was, by the way. Like, I mean, that came out, I want to say like 80 or something. It's a cover, so it doesn't matter. But it was just one of those like ridiculous things that plays in your mind that no one else if anybody else in that theater thought that, I would be so surprised. It doesn't matter, but it's one of those like little bits that when people argue about dumb crap, like that's one of those like we'll see people, and I'm not even arguing about it. It was just one of those like I fully realized, like I was like, wait, that's not that, and followed by the rational part of my brain going, it doesn't matter. Like why do you care? I'm like, I know, like other angel on my shoulder, I shouldn't care about this crap. It's stupid.
I think it's a fair comment though.
Yeah. It was just something really stupid. But
so all right. So we should start curving towards home. What is it that we what have we not touched on? I'm trying to think, since we haven't walked our way through the plot.
I really want to say how much I appreciate the way the effects with Pennywise were done in this movie, even though I don't think they were always 100% flawless. My preference with things, my personal taste on special effects have been well documented throughout this podcast. My personal taste, I'm not going to say that we can pretend like we live in a world without CG, and I think CG has many wonderful uses. I do think we over-rely on it a lot. And my personal preference is that if you're able to create it with a person in makeup, I would prefer them to do it. It's one of the reasons why I kind of lost interest in the Planet of the Apes movies, even though they seem like they're well done. Like I just would emotionally detach from watching that much mocap for that long. I don't think that it would work for me in a lot of ways. And
that last one, I mean, I get where you're coming from, but holy moly, I guess more because I work in that, as a tech artist, like I'm like, oh, I have to think about how we're going to make this thing look like this thing, et cetera, et cetera. So from a technical standpoint, the last one was pretty fucking amazing.
I look, this is a personal preference, and I think I probably will eventually see those movies. I'm not saying never. And I liked the new King Kong that we did, which was very CG heavy.
Yeah.
We did that, but my personal preference would be that if they can use someone in a suit, like I'd rather them do that, because for me that makes it a little more believable. But in the case of something like Pennywise, which is like a shape-shifting creature, I loved the way that they combined having an actor that worked really hard on his physicality and an actor in a very elaborate makeup work with the way they would extend and contort his body. It was like having kind of like an R-rated version of Beetlejuice almost. Like it was.
I feel the same way. I way prefer to see them the real effect, the practical effect, or at least a combination, than just to have the CG.
This for me, for a modern movie, was a nice mixture, because like you had this sort of magic trick where he would start out with something that was actually there, and the way he would use his body would help sell the effect, because like when he would extend his jaw out for them to turn into fangs, that would not work if he wasn't able to like move his neck and back in a certain way.
Sure.
And
true.
Sell that. So, like, I wish more movies would pick up on this, so that there's a way to marry like old-fashioned techniques and new ones. One
thing that this movie does really smartly is that in the book, and therefore in the 1990 movie miniseries, they do the thing where, because you're following Pennywise as a concept in your head the whole way through, so it can look like anything and you kind of buy it. But so when they go down and they attack him inside the cave, in the tunnels, he is a giant monster. Here, he's a giant monster, but he stays the clown the whole time, because the clown and the performance from Bill Skarsgård is what you've latched onto, and you've been following the whole way through. Yeah. So you're like, okay, well, this is the guy that he's been fighting all along. You're not like suddenly like, oh, where did our character go? He's been replaced by a different character.
Yeah. Well, and he's such a. It's funny because he looks like when you see him not done up as Pennywise, he looks like a leading man. Like he's not.
Sure.
Like a super, like Tim Curry's a quirky looking guy. Bill Skarsgård looks like he could be like a lead, or like a romantic lead in something.
Well, and the other finalist for the role was Hugo Weaving, which would have been another one of those people who looks really odd all the time.
And Hugo Weaving, I think, would have been great, but like I think they got this guy. He is really tall, so like when you see him with the kids, like he's just sort of towers above them, but then he'll like crouch down to like grab a hold of them, and like I just think the way this whole thing, like the way he all came together, and the way that they combined so many, from the actor's performance to so many different types of special effects. I think that's something I really would like to see more of. Like we see too many things, that are all one thing or another. And again, this isn't flawless the whole way through. Like there are some special effects that are done really well, and there's some that I'm kind of like, well, that's obviously like a special effect. But the overall thought process behind it, it's like you could tell they were really working to put together something special here. And I really appreciated that level of effort.
Also, one thing that as much CG as there is, and they do a lot of non-CG things like attach a camera so it's basically a steady cam on Pennywise, so that your whole view skews with him instead of the world. And they'll do a lot of weird tricks like that. They did a lot of like little camera bits. One thing I like is that they'll also they never shy away from him interacting with the kids. Like he grabs them. There's a lot of physicality to it.
Yeah, he's just right there. Yeah,
that he's in their face and he's with them. Like he's scary because he is now real. He's not the creature, werewolf, etc. He is like grabbing them and like holding them and in their face, and just like, if he was speaking, spittle would be coming into their faces. And they did a lot with that I, in retrospect, really enjoy. And you're gonna get a different performance than if it's just like, hey, Pennywise is here and here's a little green ball on a stick. For all the CG really that there is, and there's a lot of it, there's a decent amount that was pretty physical overall. And the kids the kids are great in this movie. The Losers Club is just
well, again, it really helps that
great.
It really helps that their fear of him is real, because they hadn't gotten to know him, so they're like, what the hell?
I thought all of them turned in great performances as well.
like I said, I'll save it for final thoughts, but like
yeah, go ahead.
No.
I think we should go to final thoughts. Only
Well,
because
but I wanted to say one last thing that we haven't, that I didn't hit, which I really wanted to hit. As a woman and as a mother of girls, I was so troubled by the fact that this girl Beverly is a sex object the whole time for everyone. She's a sex object for the boys she's around. She's a sex object for the creepy pharmacist. She's a sex object for her dad. I mean, actually,
the creepy pharmacist to me almost seemed like he isn't in the book or in the miniseries. He's also not creepy per se in those. Like, I kind of wonder if the creepy pharmacist was supposed to be another person under the influence of it.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying is I think that in this story, it's more. And maybe this is always the case, and I'm just not as aware of it. But it feels to me like the amount that people are sexualizing her is more than what we have in real life. But maybe I'm wrong about that. I don't know if it's the demon or if it's just real. But I was really troubled by it. Is all I'm saying.
Yeah.
I don't think that that's. I think that that's probably intentional on the part of the filmmakers to make you uncomfortable, though. That this is what this girl is experiencing. She's a young girl. She's, and I mean there's stuff that they go into in the novel, some of which Tony has like alluded to, but even like her talking about like hitting puberty in the book, and like wondering about her breasts growing, like. So there is like context for that in the book, is that we're talking about a girl that's like going through her sexual awakening, which honestly, as young as they are, and I'm not saying that I approve of this, but it's not unrealistic to think about kids exploring that at this age anymore. I mean, that's unfortunately where we're at as a society, is that we have kids that have sexual urges. That they're not.
Well, there's nothing unfortunate about sexual urges. I mean, I think that's fine. I think the problem is that they see her as a piece of meat. Everybody does, and that's what.
Well, but again, I think that that's intentional. I think that's like reflective of her home life, because she's, she lives with a sexually abusive and repressive father, and then she goes out in the world, and that sort of echoed everywhere. So I think that is, at least as far as this movie goes, I think that was supposed to intentionally make you uncomfortable. But
the question is, what will become of
Credit.
Beverly? How will Beverly adapt all of this learning, all of this pain? What is it going to turn her into as an adult? And because all adults are wounded and damaged in some way, what is she going to become? And we'll find out in the next film. We don't find out here. I'm dying to know.
I'm not going to have the same experience as Julia, or knowledge, or any number of things, especially being a woman, being a mom of girls. But I think part of it is like at the age that they are, like when you have friends that are girls as a guy, and that doesn't make it. I mean, this is much told through males' eyes, and that's I think a lot of what you're reacting to. But like there is a lot of that, like, wait, this person's a friend, but like I'm a kid going through whatever I'm going through. What do you do when your friend is attractive? But like, she cuts her hair, she looks kind of like a boy. Like all of that stuff is.
I mean, I did have female friends when I was, a preteen and a teen that I had a crush on. And it was totally unrequited. So I don't think it's unrealistic.
I think it's interesting.
And again, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with people being, attracted to each other and experiencing these new feelings that maybe they hadn't felt before because of going through puberty, all that. I'm just saying that the way that she's portrayed, she's always sexualized. Whereas I think other people, other stories, like for example, think about the Wonder Years. Obviously, Fred Savage's character has a crush on Winnie and thinks of her in sexual ways, but I never felt like Winnie was a sexualized character the whole story. You know what I mean? The whole time that show was going on. I think Tony is probably right saying that, that's partly because of this they're trying to deal with a woman's issue, but it's still told by guys, so there's not that clarity.
Yeah. And I think that's awesome. I mean, what I like about when we have these discussions is, having either you or Jamie on keeps us honest and it brings more to the story, because I didn't also reading the book where straight up they all have sex posted in the
fuck's
book,
sake. Yeah.
which is always like. Even when I read it when I was younger, I was like, what?
Yeah.
Like all of that. I even King's like, I don't know what I was thinking, but like still like, even if you were like, I don't know what I was thinking.
Probably drunk.
Really,
You
man.
know, Stephen King was on drugs. What I don't understand is why didn't an editor go,
Right.
hey, you're kind of
No,
pushing the boundaries of good taste here, Stephen.
It's not a matter of being
So-
on drugs. Yeah, editors should have cut it. King had an idea. It's pretty clear what the idea was. He had this idea of like some concept of sex magic and of them becoming more than like regular people, and yeah, it was this, you know, it's a very King idea. He often makes magic out of perverted sex. That is a King thing. And I can't tell you how many whack-ass sex scenes there are in the Dark Tower series. Just more and more crazy. You know, there's like positively reflected demon rape. I mean, there's like all kinds of shit. So yeah, that he wrote that doesn't surprise me. But some editor should have said, "No, Steve, it's going to make it difficult to adapt this book for film." And that
or
should
anything,
have.
or just read it. Like you do realize, but that does play it like the way that you're feeling is not. I mean, you're seeing kind of what was in the book.
Yeah.
And whether or not like, and you know, it was in some ways worse. I mean, I think in the book it does go into a little bit more because you know you've got this tome in a little bit more into her and dealing with you know, puberty, etc. But it's still Stephen King telling it. This isn't like, you know, this isn't a Judy Blume book, it's a Stephen King book. And so you're getting a totally different, not from a woman's perspective view that also ends in just super weirdness.
I got another problem for you, though. I mean, another major problem here is that this isn't even a book. This is half a book. You know, this isn't like book one of a 2-book series. This is the first half, the setup, essentially. I mean, it's kind of amazing they've made us go to a movie based on the first half of a book.
But it does feel very complete. Like, let's be fair here. Like you could watch this, have no idea that there was, you know, the book or the previous miniseries. You'd follow along fine. Yeah. And if you never saw the other half, it could be fun.
I feel like I suffered watching this movie from having seen the miniseries, because honestly, I kind of wasn't thinking of it as a miniseries. I was just thinking of it as a previous movie. And so the whole time I was going, well, they're running out of time to bring the adults in. I was like, when are the adults coming in? I'm like, the adults aren't going to come in.
Yeah. Another thing, like if we're just going off because they borrowed the structure of the miniseries. So like the book jumps back and forth between time periods, but they borrowed the structure of the miniseries. Yeah. Everybody knows that the second part of that miniseries is the lamer part. So they did the good stuff because the kids stuff is the part that everybody likes out of that miniseries.
Although if you remember, what I loved most about that miniseries, actually, I loved the sweetness and goofiness of the adult stuff. You know, that.
Yeah, and you were literally the only person I've ever met who saw that.
Well, let's hope they do a good job with the next movie. But I'm sorry. So I did take us off on a tangent. I know that we've gone on way too long. But I knew
I knew. Yeah.
I said this conversation is going to be hours long. I don't see us ever being done talking about it.
An epic length for an epic movie.
It's all good. But let's get our final thoughts on It 2017, knowing that we're going to be back in like 18 months or whatever it is to discuss part 2 of this. So so whatever we missed here, I'm sure we'll be able to pick up then. Listen to me as I assume that we will still be doing this 18 months from now. So
and that they're actually going to make part 2, I hope.
I have a feeling they will.
It's made $117 million. It's already made its budget back. Like this has been a, no pun intended, a monster hit.
Just think about that. Think about that, Drew. I mean, like that they were like, you know, hey, the Dark Tower is coming out and It's coming out, and if you had said to me, nobody's going to go see the Dark Tower. It's going to be, they're going to make a whole new story that has very little to do with the books, and then nobody's going to go watch it. I would have thought, that's impossible. And that It's going to be a big deal.
So On that, I've had people. Somebody was saying they knew somebody who didn't go see it because they were disappointed with the Dark Tower, and I'm like, that's you can't really do.
Well, give them a week, though. I mean, give them a week. Once they hear all the hubbub, they'll be like,
yeah.
oh.
But I mean, I just thought that was lame. But also, what I hope, and Hollywood always tends to disappoint. What I hope is some executive somewhere doesn't go, oh well, whatever Dark Tower is. Adventure action doesn't sell, horror sells now, and actually instead is reflective enough to go, wow, you know what people want to see? The thing they like.
Yeah.
Like people, like I looked at the Dark Tower, and once I heard enough reviews, I was like, well, yeah, I mean, because the way it ends up, like you can make a side story, and I guess that's okay. But what I really kind of wanted to see was at least part of one of those damn books that I read incessantly. Any of it, just pick a one and go from there. I've seen adaptations where they pick up in the middle, and because that structure of that story, there's even like they did for Berserk, the manga that got adapted to anime. There's even a part that they've adapted into a comic already that is the prequel. If you wanted to, you could start there. But no, they were like, and they tried to say, well, it's really a side bullshit. You didn't know how, you didn't have the budget to do the books, and you didn't have the, you didn't have the roadmap. You've been trying to adapt it forever. You just want to get some shit out there. So you keep the license and hopefully people will come. So guess what? When people
Is that what it was?
Movie,
do you think they were afraid? Were they on a time thing where they were going to lose the license if they didn't put out a movie?
I can't tell you that for sure, but they've been trying to adapt it forever. And they like it smacks of, we don't know what to do with this, which is understandable because that's a crazy ass, like I didn't know how they were going to adapt it. I mean, it's insane. Like it goes all over the map. There's different, it's hard. It's really hard. It's not as easy to adapt as It, which is a monster movie with kids in it. Like you can elevator pitch it. Stand by Me with monsters. Done. And then you can go further by going, by the way, Stranger Things set the precedent for this. Here you go. Let's all make money, right? Yeah. So
this has been in development longer than even Stranger Things has been around. Like they've been talking about this since I lived in Las Vegas. Like this movie.
Yeah, they even had another actor signed.
What I'm saying, well, I mean, Dark Tower's been, I don't even know when the rights were bought, but it's been forever as well. But it's a much more sprawling, it's not one book. It's like 7 books that goes all over the map. And even at one point, even includes Stephen King as Stephen King.
Like, I loved that bit. I loved that. Oh, yeah.
But all of it goes all over the map. It's not an easy thing. But when, like,
well, we may review that, but we should probably
okay.
Well, anyway, like, I think, making the movie, like we live in a world where there's been one was successful, and I think there's a reason because they made made the thing that people wanted to.
Yeah.
They made
that's absolutely right.
The way that I, in a manner that is really close to the book.
Yeah, a serious, respectful, clever, well-made, independently well-made film that doesn't feel.
Stephen King loved it.
Yeah, it doesn't suffer from any of the things that we've seen in like King adaptations. Plus, even if the book didn't exist, this is a well-made film. That's, in fact, I don't even have a final thought. That's my only final thought. I could say nothing else. But we started with Julia. So Julia, what are final thoughts on It?
I mean, I think I've said everything I wanted to say. It's really scary, but it's also got some really very thought-provoking themes. And I think I'll continue to think about this film for weeks to come and have revelations and maybe nightmares. But I'm really thrilled with it.
Wonderful. Who do we go to next? Was it Drew? Yeah, I think so. Drew, final thoughts.
I found this movie to be incredibly cathartic, and I think it's a great movie. Like whatever problems I might have with it, like we've discussed at length here, but like even with those, like I don't think, that's nitpicky stuff. Like I can't recommend this movie highly enough, and it doesn't just float, it soars. This is a great movie.
Nice.
That's a good quote.
Tony?
Like I said, I like it, and I think they did a lot of really effective stuff. Maybe I could have used a little bit more practical effects, but I think the CG overall looked great in a time when I usually spot crappy CG pretty easily and issue that. I like I said, I am envious of people who were more scared because I think something happened along the way that I don't know why that worked out in this.
Are you broken now, Tony?
I don't know. I
Aw.
mean, there's other movies that have scared, like that maybe aren't as good that have creeped me out more. But I
Right.
think that all the creepy parts are done creepily enough. I'm gonna
Sure.
chalk this up to just whatever is going on. This one's on me. I think. Because I've talked to a bunch of people about it, and like I think it is a little bit more, like Jason said, for me on the adventure side, but I think the parts that are super effective, I recognize those all along the way, like, whoa, that is freaky. Oh man, that is crazy. Holy crap, he actually just really bit the kid's arm. All that stuff. The giant, coming out of the screen, the reveal of what's actually horrific in the dairy picture is effective. All that stuff, like, super great. I just wish I wish it had had the desired effect on me, because I could have used that kind of horror, last Friday or this past Friday.
Wonderful. Yeah, I have nothing else to add. We've talked about all of it, but I'm really thankful that we did, because we could probably keep talking for like an hour. There's so much more, but let's well, definitely people on the Facebook page will probably continue the conversation and challenge all of us to rethink anything. But I want to go to endorsements. I want to know, like, watching this, what did this put you in mind of watching, or you can just talk about whatever has been like on your mind or that you've been watching over the past week. So going back, Julia, do you have anything to endorse this week?
I don't have anything that I particularly want to endorse. Just what we said before about, more tragedies going on, not just the hurricanes, Hurricane Irma, which is the current one that's, just traumatizing Florida, but also the wildfires that are everywhere. There's so much going on. And so, just once again, what we said before, which is just, if you can help, if you can volunteer, if you can donate money, if you can do anything to help your fellow man and woman and child who is suffering, and pet who is suffering out of these awful catastrophes that are going on in our country and outside of it, please do. But I don't have anything I've been watching or reading that I particularly want to draw attention to at the moment.
Because it's been all about the hurricane, which is great. I totally understand. Drew, what about you?
Sometimes I think back on the stuff that I endorse, and I realize how much mediocre genre TV I watch. And because I just love monsters. I really love monsters, and I will probably watch just about anything with monsters in it. So like I've come around to thinking about the line between stupid and stupid awesome, and how thin that is along the lines of a lot of these shows, which are admittedly not always amazing, but there'll be like something about it that'll be like, okay, I've checked into this show now. So on Hulu, after years of avoiding watching it after it's been canceling, because like literally somebody just, like an old friend to me described this show as Buffy meets Hamilton, but without any singing. And I was like, nope, not going to watch that. Sorry. But, there was always like, well, there might be a cool monster on it. So I started watching Sleepy Hollow on the TV show, not the Tim Burton film, on Hulu this last week, because the whole thing is now on there. There is a point where the Headless Horseman has a machine gun, and that is stupid awesome. And because I would totally buy an action figure of that. I'm not above it. And I love monsters, and I love the idea of the Headless Horseman with a machine gun. So that is what I've been watching when I was not watching it, which is admittedly much better written than anything on Sleepy Hollow. And I am at peace with that, and I'm going to probably watch it when I'm done, because I want to see more of the Headless Horseman with a machine gun.
Awesome.
And that's my endorsement this week.
Love it. Tony, what do you got going on?
I'm trying to think. I've been so busy.
You've been in the studio
with
actually,
work, and then finishing. Rise from Fire finished recording our album. It's been a long, strange trip, but mastering and everything happens, and then replication. So we're still weeks out from actually like releasing the album, but I'm digging a lot first, Rain and I met through Musicians Wanted ad, so in '96. So 2 decades later, we're finally finishing an album together. Ta-da! But anyway,
we knew you then. We met you guys like pretty close to after you got together.
Yeah, 97, I think it was.
Yep.
Just some time for it to come back when there were more. I'm trying to think what else. I haven't done much just because work's been really crazy. But I will go back to endorsing. I'm noticing a lot of people, some of which I've met through comics, some of which I met through actually just this podcast. Really being, or cinema actually as well, being affected by Irma. And I just, I doubt we put this out later. I'm hoping that you weather everything and that you can, that you're safe and everything like that. Speaking towards the future, that's been a concern. Secondarily, on a totally different, not as heavy note, Fantastic Fest is quickly approaching. The Stephen King adaptation of Gerald's Game will be shown there. So I've got to watch that, even if I risk not seeing something else, so I can talk, which means probably, I guess we have to figure out alternate people while I'm at Fantastic Fest, unless I give a extra review or something off to the side. I won't be there for those, I guess, 2 weekends. But I plan to come back and talk a lot more about the horror movies I've seen and, have a lot of endorsements. I mean, during that week, I usually see between 35 and 40 movies.
And we have not yet even planned for what we're going to do after. Are you here next week for Rose Red?
Definitely here next week. It starts the 20th through the 28th, and then
we'll figure out what we're gonna do.
Yeah. So Fantastic Fest is coming. I need to post actually the Gerald's Game trailer, which is one of the big PR things being done through Fonz PR. He does a lot of the Fantastic Fest stuff. So they're really pushing for Gerald's Game. It looks like it's going to be a pretty good adaptation. I'm really curious how it's all going to play out, because it's kind of one of those like, that's an odd one to adapt. Let's see how that goes. Maybe we'll have a lot of Stephen King adaptations that are really good. I have no idea, but we should post the trailer. And if you're listening to this before we post it, then we'll do that pretty soon, because they're really blitzing it. Seems like there's something else around there, but I'll try to catch as much horror. Last time it was The Void and several others that I was able to cover. We should do The Ring versus The Grudge at some point, which was last year's Fantastic Fest.
Actually, a good idea.
Totally do that sometime post Fantastic Fest and catch up a year later. Because
I've been thinking, since we've done The Ring in the past. I can't remember if we've done The Grudge, but a theme episode like that where we talk specifically about a topic like The Ring versus The Grudge, or one thing I've been thinking about is doing an episode where we just talk about favorite previous episodes that we did. Looking back on things that were really interesting to explore and that might be cool to explore again. I think that might be kind of fun.
Would that be like a writer's strike episode where we would just...
It would. Except for
play clips.
I'm not going to, and I can't find any way to get anybody else to go through all the archives and actually find the clips. So it would just be our memories. It'd be like a writer's strike episode without the flashbacks. So they would literally just sit around going, "Hey, remember that time when we had to go to the hospital?"
That was awesome.
The other characters would go, "Oh, right, yeah."
I was actually thinking about that earlier, about maybe just doing episode on horror, kind of like more like the panels we've done.
Yeah.
By the way, also this weekend came across 2 more to add to our Corman pantheon of movies that be part of the Castle of Horror studio. Crocodog being one of them, and then the very tiny Piranha Dogs.
Oh,
so
that sounds almost cute.
It would be, until there's like dozens of them.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, it's like Gremlins. Gremlins are kind of cute unless there's dozens of them.
Exactly. Yeah. So Crocodog, lies in wait, and that it's a dog.
I really want to see the Crocodog. That sounds.
Piranha Dog was the other one, because I think that happened when we were on a walk and there was a tiny dog, and I was like, I guess it's really ferocious, and it's like, It's a tiny, tiny dog. It was behind a fence, but you could tell it was tiny. I was like, well, yeah, I mean, it isn't as scary because if it attacked you, you could like defend yourself. But if there were like dozens of those tiny dogs, that would be scary.
Okay.
Yes.
Sounds good.
Yes, indeed.
Piranha dogs. There you go.
All right.
All right. My endorsement actually is a book that I've been reading like yesterday and today, and it's wonderful. It's called Disappearance at Devil's Rock by Paul Tremblay. It actually came out in paperback about 6 months ago, so I'm a little behind in getting to this book, but it's about the I just read Picnic at Hanging Rock a couple weeks ago. Disappearance at Devil's Rock, I think probably owes a little bit to Picnic at Hanging Rock. It's about these three boys that went out hiking, and one of them didn't come back, and about the mystery of what the hell happened to them. It's very, very different from Picnic at Hanging Rock, but some of the themes are the same, and so that was how I wound up reading it. It's so good, and it's a new book. This is a new book by Paul Tremblay. He was the guy who wrote Head Full of Ghosts. He's a really wonderful new horror writer. I just can't say enough good things about it. I'm nearly done with this. I've got like 75 pages to go.
Nothing against the writer, but I hope that eventually this keeps morphing until you're like, and I'm reading this new book, Rock Rocket, Rockety Rock. Just continues this theme where you just keep replacing like words with rock. And by the fourth book that you've read, like on this week I'm reading,
mix it up.
Trip
I'm
to
reading
rock, and then it just becomes this week I'm reading rock to rock. The fourth book in the strange morphing non sequitur series I'm reading, where everything morphs into rock.
That was actually. Do you remember Jack Chick actually put that into one of his tracks? Was this guy who looks like
the Rock?
Yeah, Lemmy was singing, or the guy who looked like Lemmy was singing.
It's just a generic rock band. But
well, for those who are about to rock, for those who are about to rock, I salute you. So
he could not come up with anything better for a metal band to say or rock band to say than we're going to rock with the Rock. Which is hilarious because I think Stryper has a song about that God is the rock, there's rock and roll and then he's the rock, which you hold steadfast to in the biblical, like he's strong. But I always thought that was hilarious. There's actually like a Stryper thing.
The closest approximation to this fake rocker in a Jack Chick fundamentalist tract was Stryper, a Christian band.
Well, I don't think Stryper had written their song at the time that Jack Chick, maybe, but anyway, but there's so many lyrics that you could pick.
No. I'm not saying that he was anticipating Stryper. I'm just saying that the closest thing we can think of that's even like that. Anyway, God, those things are horrible.
It's kind of absurd at this point.
Can we please? I want to stage some of those. I think it would be great to get a stage and perform live performances of Jack Chick tracks. That would be so great.
You could do that, Jason. You could do that at like a poetry night, amateur poetry night. Just read.
So, Jason, I can almost guarantee you, in the world that we live in, I can't prove this.
Yeah.
Sometime during the 80s, I bet you there's a Southern Baptist super fundamentalist church deep in the South that has staged their own opus of one of those tracks.
For sure.
I can't imagine a world where that hasn't happened.
Wasn't there one there was like a lesbian teacher who turned out to be a witch? And
aren't
the great thing is there's always giant cauldrons and smoke and fire. I mean, it's these things. The imagery is really awesome.
I was thinking about this the other day. I know we're on a tangent, and I apologize, but so how much of, and I've seen this from this has been told by many. I've seen it in a bunch of true life novels where the trappings of the devil, which is mentioned in the Bible. If you didn't have the Bible, you probably wouldn't have the devil unless you saw a horror movie, right?
Sure.
The trappings of the devil got a lot of kids interested in the occult.
Sure.
More so than horror movies or Dungeons and Dragons and stuff. And I always find that fascinating. That I guarantee you that Jack Chick tracks, there's more than a few kids who were like, wait, what? Spells and powers?
That's why so many
on some cool shit. I don't advocate that at all. Why am I even defending that? It sounds silly. Anyway.
No, but that's why so many Catholics. That's why so many Satanists are former Catholics.
Oh well,
I've
seen a lot of them.
You have the ritual. You have like the ritualistic thing that you're used to, but then there's all the stuff that you were told was terrible, and you're like, that's really interesting what they're saying.
And I find that fascinating. And people are like, what gets you the devil? It's like, so in this in Dungeons and Dragons, how many times is the devil mentioned? In the Bible, how many times is the devil mentioned?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I had a friend who Dare came to his school, and when he heard about what they said pot did, he was like, sign me up. That sounds great. And became a huge stoner. The total opposite of what they meant. But he was just like, wait, hallucin, like all this stuff? That sounds magnificent. Let me, and he just went out and bought pot. I
got one more endorsement. I got to bring us slightly back on track towards straight up horror. There is, Tony, you're going to love these guys if you haven't checked them out yet. TV Terrors. Drew, you too. TV Terrors.
I think I'm
this is a Facebook page. I know I've mentioned them before, but it's been a couple of years. They basically constantly TV Terrors, they post stuff about different horror shows, miniseries, TV movies, what have you, like that were on TV, and they'll post it. Anthony Rotolo, the host, has his podcast where he goes over different things like Night Stalker or what have you. There are some trends that I wanted to quote from him, but I'll leave you to go and check out his review of the It miniseries from 1990. It is so good, and what I really love is he spends some time in a digression about how annoyed he is at phrases people use all the time to describe older pictures, like cheesy or does it stand up or does it hold up and all that. And he's like, these are such meaningless things to talk about. It's so dumb. You either like it or you don't like it, but it's like meaningless to go, does it hold up? Like it's a movie. You either like it or you don't like it. I really admired all of that. He has actually plugged our show as well. So that's cool. But I don't want you to think that that's why I'm mentioning it again. I really loved his discussion of the 1990 It miniseries, and I think you should check it out.
We should repost that as well.
Yeah,
I've been super crap about posting my endorsements on the page, and
me too. I suck. We need you know what we need? We need like they have over at Slate. They have an intern whose job is just to post things on the page that we mention on the show.
Yeah, so if anybody wants that job, if anybody wants to be our intern and post stuff on the page that we mentioned, let us know.
Yeah, for sure. That's for real. Contact us. Maybe
and I feel like, although what we're really saying is we're terrible and sometimes lazy, more busy than anything else, and that's actually what I
like to think of it that way. I do. I like to call myself busy.
Let's call it busy instead of lazy or whatever. But still, like, I feel a little guilty going, hey, have we got a free job for you for the free podcast?
No, but check this out. All right. So thank you. You got this has been a wonderful conversation. We should continue it on the Facebook page. So if you're listening, you should go to the Facebook page and listen to it. If you like this show, I have two requests. There's a review that we want to read, but we'll save it for next week because we're going long. But if you have a review and you want to leave it for us, leave the review on iTunes. That will filter out to everything else, and it means so much to us. If you like the show and you have friends you might like the show, take them down to your basement and flood it.
No.
And then get them to listen to the show. That's all I'm saying, is get your friends to listen to the show.
You don't have to take them down the basement. Just talk to them nicely.
Yeah. It's fine. We're on the internet. You could all sit at your computer.
Yes.
You don't have to tie anybody to anything or take them to storm drains with clowns. You don't have to do that.
We're all listening to the podcast down here.
It floats around the internet. It floats in the air. Our podcast floats into your brain.
Yeah, and with almost, as far as I can tell, and I'll hedge. There's the legal boilerplate. As far as I can tell, there are no detrimental clown effects to our podcast. So even though we aren't reading that review, thank you, Ricardo, for sending us the review. And
I want to give it its
for
own
listening
time,
to-
but this was
yeah,
an
I know,
extra.
but I just want to say, like,
I will say that I was pleasantly surprised that someone out there in internet land actually thinks I'm funny, because I can never tell.
That's
Yeah.
wonderful. That's yeah.
I mean, I would say I tell the jokes.
He also said that he could listen to Jason's voice for hours, which I can too, and that's why I married him. So I agree.
That's like literally that's really sweet. But let's save this because I'm gonna read that review. That
All right.
I absolutely am. We don't have time this week, but I'm gonna read it. But God, we are so thankful. So wow, to an extent, we're talking about 2 episodes in a row because we're gonna talk about it next week. Okay. Gosh, I got nothing else. Thank you, everybody, and we will be back next week with Rose Red, and we'll see how well that gets Stephen King's vision across. You guys have a wonderful week in the meantime. I'll talk to you all soon. Bye.
Right.
Float on.